This guy's hogging up the road. Alright, let me just get past him. Oh, I gotta go this way actually. What? Hello everybody, today we're going to be taking a look at a brand new MMO that's come out on Steam and I think it's supposed to come out on mobile soon, and that is Once Human. For more MMO related content, check out my channel below. Okay, so Once Human is a survival MMO. So there are concepts of hunger and thirst and a bigger focus than other MMOs on things like base building or house building and not dying. The other thing I want to point out is that there are actually two types of servers in this game. There are PvP servers where there's open world PvP where anybody that sees you and anybody that you see can and probably will fight and kill you. So there's battles for territory and stuff as well. And there are PvE servers which are a lot more relaxed where you can just kind of go around, do the story and kill enemies together. Now this game is already getting quite popular, but if you're apprehensive to give it a shot, hopefully with this video, you can ask the question of whether this game is worth your time. Now this video will be structured in sections and will be covering things like visuals and aesthetics, world building, combat, skill trees, and many more. So feel free to jump ahead to those sections in the timeline if you're just interested in something specific. Alright, so let's get into it. Now, as with every new MMO that comes out, there are good things and there are bad things about Once Human. There are things that are worth being hopeful about and there are things that are worth being a little bit cautious about. The first thing that we're going to talk about though, this game has completely, and I mean completely, knocked out of the park. And that is visuals and aesthetic. I'm not gonna lie, I feel a little silly saying this because it's very evident, but this game is insanely beautiful. It is absolutely gorgeous. The lighting is phenomenal. In fact, when there's a sunset or a sunrise or when the moon is out and I'm running around or riding my bike around, I always stop and stare. It's always so picturesque. Even the way that the sun shines through things like trees, like foliage, or just buildings is absolutely amazing looking. They've also done a really good job with camera effects and post-processing. So even when you're doing a mundane task like mining ore, it kind of looks like you're in a movie. And if you're doing something big like a boss fight, it looks really good. If screenshots and screen recording didn't exist, there would be no way for me to accurately describe how amazing this game looks, for an MMO especially. There is something that I don't quite like about the aesthetic of this game though, and that is that everything kind of looks the same wherever you go. Now we'll talk about the world in more detail in a second, but there are sections to the map, and when you go from one section to the other, sometimes you don't even realize it because both of them just look the same. In fact, most of the map looks very similar. Now this could be because the game is new and maybe in the future we're gonna get some more diverse biomes, but for now it is kind of odd. But aside from that, the game looks really good. I mean, just look at this. I'm just showing you gameplay footage here. This is not a cinematic or anything. This is just footage that I took while playing the game. It looks amazing, and that's worth something because that's the biggest thing a lot of new players look for, that their game looks good and they like living in the world, and I certainly do. But that's already a pretty big plus. But showing you things in a beautiful way is just one part of the equation. The other part of the equation is what it's showing you, and for that, we can take a look at the world. The world of Once Human is actually crafted really well. No part of the game looks bad and it all looks pretty amazing. Like we talked about in the last section though, it all kind of does look the same, but they all look the same really well. Everything is pretty thematically consistent as well, from the ruined cities to the abandoned military outposts to the forest to the swamps. Everything looks like it's part of the same world, and it feels really nice to travel from one end to the other because there's no drastic cuts or jumps from one biome to the other. The other thing is that this world is actually really large. It's absolutely massive from the get-go. And you're not restricted by level or anything, although if you go to the higher level areas, the tougher monsters will probably kill you, but you're not restricted from going there. You can go there at any time. So you really do get full free reign in this world, which is actually something that a lot of open world games struggle with, and I'm glad that this game doesn't. Now, a lot of people will worry that because the game is so large, it's gonna feel empty, and that kind of is true. The game is actually mostly solo focused outside of a few large boss fights, so that aspect is there, and that is kind of a bummer. But the world itself actually feels quite real and lived in thanks to all the structures that they've placed everywhere, and also because of player housing. Now we'll talk about player housing in detail in just a bit, but for now you should know that players can put up their houses wherever they want in the world as long as it doesn't clash with like a road or other structures. So because of that, when you're riding along the roads, you actually see a lot of players hanging out, their houses, little neighborhoods having formed already, and that makes the world feel really lived in and alive, and that's really nice. The other thing that makes the world feel real is that they've created an extremely believable physical layout for it. All the cities, towns, and roads are laid out and connected in such a way that it actually feels kind of like a real world, and everything kind of makes sense. Traveling by bike or whatever vehicle you choose, and we'll talk about vehicles in a second as well, from edge to edge feels like you're living in a world that actually could exist. Now, like I said, it is a bit solo focused and you're not really interacting with players outside of very specific scenarios, but because of all that housing and all those nice layouts and the way that the roads are set up, you're actually going to be seeing a lot of players doing their own thing, so it does help you feel like you actually are playing an MMO. All in all though, the only complaint I have for the world is the same one I had for the aesthetics, which is that everything kind of looks the same, but beyond that they've done a really fantastic job. Now, as good as it is to live in a world so well crafted, there needs to be things to do, and one of the biggest parts of Once Human is combat and monster design. Now, the combat in this game is a little bit of a mixed bag. I like it for the most part, but I don't love how slow some of it is. For example, swinging a bat or any sort of melee weapon really feels really slow, but it does hit with a satisfying amount of force though, so it's not that it feels floaty, it just feels like I'm kind of fighting the whole game in slow motion. Even with ranged weapons like crossbows or guns, it all feels just a little slow, and I think to me, more than anything, this is a big wasted opportunity because they've put in a lot of work for this game to make it look and feel like a movie in every other aspect except for the combat, because it is at the end of the day action combat, it's not tap target, and for them to have an action combat system that is this slow is just a disconnect that I think didn't need to be there. If they had made a fast-paced action combat system here where you're shooting, dodging, rolling, running, not only is that more exciting for players, but also adds more skill expression to the game, where you can learn to be better at dodging, learn to be better at aiming and all those things. But as it is, especially with normal mobs, all I have to do is stand still and shoot at them, and they die in 2 to 3 hits as long as I'm not severely under-leveled or under-geared. The only amount of skill expression that you can really get out of this game is headshots with ranged weapons, but even that is very easy to do. These mobs, they don't run around or jump around in any significant way, so you just have to stand still and shoot, as you can see what I'm doing here on the screen. As a result, combat is a little boring except for boss fights which have mechanics, and more than anything, again, just feels like a massive wasted opportunity. Beside that though, the monster design itself is one of the, if not the best in any MMO I've ever played. Look, I'm aware that I'm making a very strong statement here, but I actually think that there's no argument against it. There are a lot of repeating mobs where you'll see the same mobs that you saw at the start at the end, but just scaled up in HP and damage. But each one of those repeating mobs looks incredibly well crafted, and more than anything, they're endlessly intriguing. This is something that a lot of MMOs get wrong. A lot of them try to create the coolest looking enemies, but not enemies where you sit and wonder, wow, that looks insane. What is that thing? Where did that come from? How do I even beat it? Now again, look, the mobs are not hard to beat, but they look like they are. They look interesting, they look intriguing, and they pique your curiosity. And these are just normal mobs. When you get to the bosses, they're genuinely unbelievable. No, really, they are actually unbelievable. This is another one of those things where if screen recording didn't exist, I actually wouldn't have the words to describe how insanely cool and insanely insane the bosses look. But screen recording does exist, so here, take a look. Okay, do you see this thing? Do you see this thing? This is Dark Souls, Elden Ring level boss design. It looks unbelievably cool. There's a lady on his back. Yeah, I was not exaggerating when I said that this MMO is actually one of the best in terms of monster design I think I've ever played, and I've played a lot of them. Even some of the field bosses and events that you run into are insane looking and like nothing you've ever seen. They are stupidly detailed as well. I mean, look at this thing. I just ran into this while riding along the road on my bike, and it's a bus that's dropping off more monsters. I've never played an MMO with monsters that look like they came out of a proper AAA RPG game. This is really top tier work, and I cannot stress enough how good this is. Again, however, there are a couple of bad things about the combat system like I mentioned earlier, but all in all though, the combat still is pretty fun, relatively speaking, and that monster design, oh my, that is more than enough to make up for any shortcomings. Now, when you've gone out into the world and you're fighting your monsters, your HP, the durability, and your weapons, all those things don't really recover by themselves passively. So to recover them, you actually have to go back home, and what your home looks like depends on what you do with player housing and building. So one of the big draws of Once Human is that it has a housing and construction system where you and other players can build your own houses. You can build these houses wherever in the world as long as it doesn't overlap with another player's territory or game structures like roads or existing buildings. Now the amount of structural components and furniture available is actually somewhat comprehensive. For a new release, it's already quite good. They've actually got a lot of stuff in here that you can spend a lot of time unlocking and then building. Hopefully more items do come in the future though, but you can definitely already have a pretty nice looking house that has everything that you need, even now at this early point in the game. The biggest upside of the system is what we talked about before, is that the world feels so much more alive when you're driving down the road and to the left and the right of you there's houses and even entire neighborhoods that have popped up already in the short amount of time the game's been out. I've seen a lot of creativity coming out of this system as well, with a lot of houses being very unique looking, some of them not so good unique, but some of them very good unique. And I always think housing systems in MMOs are actually kind of a must-have, because one of the biggest ways of socializing is going to your friends' houses, seeing what they've built, and just hanging out in each other's homes. The houses also have functional aspects to them, such as sleeping in your bed returning health and something called sanity, and also houses being the place where you store your crafting benches, your stoves, and whatever else you use to make stuff in the game. Now the system does have a few quirks and annoyances, especially regarding elevation. Like here, why do I need to place a foundation to place these half stairs when the reason I need stairs is because the minimum height for the foundation above is too high in the first place and I'm just trying to go up there, right? Like it doesn't really make a lot of sense. Roofing is another common problem that a lot of people have. So there are a few bugs and a few glitches that they need to work out, but honestly, the housing system is already quite great. Now there are a few more functional aspects of the house, and these are mostly useful for driving, crafting, and other activities. Alright, so combat isn't the only thing that you can do in this game. There's a bunch of other things to do as well. The first and my personal favorite of these is driving. Now there are a ton of different vehicles you can unlock, ranging from cars to pickup trucks to entire semi-trucks. Yeah, those big ones with like 16 wheels, yeah, those ones. Now you do start off with a bike, which is a bit slow, but it's still much faster than running. The controls are good and responsive, and because the roads are well planned and the layout of the map is well thought out, it's actually a genuine blast to hop on your bike and ride around the world. It's one of my favorite things to do, and I'll do it with no purpose. I'll just do it for fun. The next thing is the crafting system. You can go out and gather materials such as logs and different types of ores. You can melt them and you can process them in other ways, and then using those materials you can craft all of your weapons, armor, and even healing items like adrenaline and bandages. Now you can get these items as drops or from crates around the world, but it is much easier to craft them. The system itself is quite comprehensive and complete, and there's a lot of tiers of items, so you'll actually be spending a lot of time crafting your way through those many tiers as you progress. In general, I do like a big crafting system, so I am a fan of this, but the only thing I don't love is that there are so many different stations in the game. Just when you start out, there's like 3 or 4 stations, and the more you progress, the more stations you're gonna have to stuff into your house, and you're gonna need a whole section just full of different crafting stations, and that's a little annoying to manage, but it's not a huge problem. The next thing is power and defense. Now, some furniture and even some crafting stations require power. There are many ways to generate power, starting with solar panels and then larger generators later as you unlock them, and you can deliver the power that you generate using wires to whatever needs it. Now, power is mostly used for defense systems, which are structures or furniture you can build around your house and inside your house to defend it from threats such as other players in PvP worlds. In PvE worlds, these aren't all that useful because honestly, there's nothing to really defend your house from. I personally love power systems in games like these. I think I've spent hours and hours on redstone in Minecraft and wiring in Terraria, so for me, this is an absolute plus. The final other activity I want to talk about is collecting deviations. Now, deviations are kind of like Pokemon. Don't sue me, Nintendo, but they're basically little creatures that you can collect out in the world, sometimes as drops from a boss fight, or sometimes just hanging out in the world, that you go out and you collect them, and then you can put them to work. Now, there are 2 main types of deviations. Combat deviations, which help you fight and will fight alongside you, and crafting deviations, which will passively gather different materials for you and help you craft different items. Both of these types are incredibly useful, so I do recommend going around trying to collect as many of them and as many different types of them as possible, and they add a nice little activity that you can do when you're tired of all those fights. So there's actually a lot of different things you can do in this game, a lot of variety in the activities that you can do, and this is always a great thing for an MMO to not get stale really quickly. Now, we talked a little bit earlier about how there's a variety of items that you can get and you have to unlock these items. And the way that you unlock these items is through the skill tree. So the skill tree in Once Human is called the memetic tree. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. If a dev's in the comments, please let me know. For now, I'm going to call it the mimetic tree. Now you gain 3 to 4 points called ciphers every time you level up, and as rewards for meeting the season goals as they unlock. Once you've gotten these ciphers, there are 4 branches of this tree that you can go down. The first branch, infrastructure, unlocks new gathering tools, which in turn then unlocks new materials that you can gather. The second branch, crafting, unlocks new crafting recipes, which include gear, ammo, and other equipment. The third branch, logistics, unlocks different cooking recipes, farming structures, and power generation. And the final branch, building, unlocks structures and furniture, which includes defense systems and also garages and vehicles. Now this tree actually has a pretty good balance between the amount of points you gain as you progress and the amount of stuff you can unlock. The only exception to this, and this is the part I don't like about this tree, is the building tree. A lot of the furniture that you can use in this game is locked behind this tree, but spending points in it early on feels like a big waste since it's all just aesthetic, right? It's just furniture for your house. But the other trees are actually directly tied to your progression because you need better tools to get better materials and you need better weapons to fight bigger bosses. And so because of that, the game is essentially discouraging you from putting points into that building tree, which means that your house is going to end up looking quite barren and lame at the start of the game, which is really silly because housing is not just an important part of the gameplay, but a big selling point of this game. So new players that come in and see that they can't actually put anything interesting in their house might just stop playing entirely. Another thing that might get new players to quit quite fast is a question that hangs over the head of every MMO. And that's the question of, is this game pay to win? Okay, now we get to the burning question about any new MMO that comes out, especially one that's coming out from the East. Is this game pay to win? Shockingly, and I do mean shockingly, it's not. Well, not really anyway. There is a store, and in that store you can buy cosmetics, and there is a battle pass which also gives you cosmetics, and there is some sort of subscription which also gives you a currency to buy more cosmetics. So all of that is cosmetics. But there is one aspect of the store that could be considered somewhat pay to win depending on how you define that term, and that is the ability to buy different recipes for furniture. Now you can't buy furniture directly, but there are a lot of recipes for furniture that you can later craft in game that you can only get through the store or through the battle pass. Now I say that this could be pay to win because for some people, building a beautiful home and having all the coolest furniture is the end game. And if that's you, then yes, this game is 100% pay to win because the coolest furniture is absolutely locked behind a paywall. But I don't think that's most people. I don't think that's even 10% of people. For most people, the point of an MMO is the social systems and the boss fights and the world and the combat and the gearing and all those things. And in that aspect, this game is actually not pay to win whatsoever. So if you're worried about pay to win and you don't really care about housing and decorations inside that housing, you have absolutely zero reason to be worried. And that really did surprise me. I was expecting a lot of pay to win in this game, but I'm happy to say that there really isn't much at all. And that pretty much covers all the main aspects of Once Human. So the question still remains, should you play this game, should you not? And what are my overall thoughts? So there you go. That's everything I like and don't quite like about Once Human. So what's the verdict? Do I recommend this game or do I not? Well, it does have a few flaws here and there. For the most part, it's an absolutely beautiful game set in a world with a lot to do and one that is teeming with monsters so well designed that I'm still struggling to get over how good it is, even though I've beaten them over and over again. On top of all of that, the game is absolutely free. I don't really know how they've made it free, especially because there's very little pay to win, if at all, but they've made a really incredible free-to-play MMO here. So yeah, I think the answer should be pretty obvious by now, but in case it isn't, I 100% recommend this game, and this game, without a doubt, has my seal of approval. And that's pretty much it for my thoughts on this game and whether you should play it or not. But remember, once again, this is an early review, so things could change in the future, and maybe some of the things you don't like will go away, and some of the things you like might do too. Either way, these were my thoughts on the game as it is right now, and I hope that I've helped you make a decision on whether this game is worth your time. But those are just my thoughts. What do you guys think? Do you already play Once Human? Do you plan to? Let me know in the comments below what you think about this brand new MMO. Thank you for watching, subscribe for more MMO content, and I'll see you guys next time.